Hey, welcome back to Case Studies. I'm excited to listen to Manti Te'o and his presentation from the MW3 Conference. I hope you enjoy it.
I'll be your therapist today.
I love it. It's therapy.
Manti, thank you so much for letting me interview you and letting us all get to hear your story today.
Thank you.
You've had the most impressive career in football. You were the #1 recruit for high school in 2019 in the nation, later going on to be a Heisman finalist at Notre Dame, and then a spectacular NFL career.
Thank
I
you.
mean, you understood the assignment. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
So walk us through a little bit your football career, like starting out, like this story of becoming a world famous football star.
Well, I think we got to go back to the beginning. Everything started when I was 5 years old, and you and I were kind of talking about this backstage. You live in Hauula now. I was born and raised in Laie, and if anybody knows anything about Laie, it's literally Little Texas. Like, if you ever watched Friday Night Lights, that's
True.
My community. Everything is eat, sleep, breathe football. And so I remember when I was 5, my father and I were driving in our green Ford Bronco at that time, and he asked me, he was like, "Son, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And my grandfather was a standout football player at Kouku. My uncles were standout football players. My dad played that. So when I came out of the womb in 1991, I wasn't going to play tennis, you know. So I responded to my dad. I was like, I'm going to play football. But his follow-up question was the question that put me on a path and a trajectory which would lead me to accomplish a lot of the things that I accomplished, to learn a lot about life, that would equip me to overcome a lot of the challenges that I would face in life. And that question that he asked me was, do you just want to play football, or do you want to be one of the best that the state has ever seen? Now, as a 5-year-old, I didn't know what he meant by that, but I responded with an answer that I felt would make any father proud. And I said, I'm going to be the best, Dad. But my dad had a very, very clear mission, and he had a very clear plan about how that was going to go. So for the next 5 years, every summer, my parents would take my sisters and I to the Honolulu Zoo. And they would take us there early in the morning, and my father would drop us off, though. And then he would leave for hours. He would leave for most of the day, come back, pick us up, and take us all the way back home. I hate the zoo now. So I lived in San Diego, California for about 10 years. And my wife kept bugging me, like, can we please go to the zoo? I guess San Diego is home to one of the best zoos in the world. Obviously, I've never been there because of these 5 long summers. But it was one of those things where I came to find out that while we was at the zoo, my dad was going to coaching clinics. He was going to speed and conditioning camps so that he could learn everything he needed to learn to make his son the best. And so our journey started there. And I remember I probably was about 10 years old, and there was a festival going on down the street at the grocery store in our hometown. And I had planned to go with my friends, but we had training that day. And I remember I'm out in the yard, and I'm training with my dad, and I see my friends kind of walking past our house. And I remember telling I didn't tell my dad this, but I'm just staring at them walking, right, as they're going to this festival. And my dad saw that I saw them. And he said, "What's the matter?" And I told him, I was like, "Dad, why can't I go to the festival? Why can't I go with my friends?" And my dad had he had a knack for taking very simple moments and making them life-teaching moments. And my dad said, "Son, there's going to be a day where you're going to be living your dream, and your friends are still going to be walking to the festival. They're still going to be walking to the beach. They're still going to be hanging out at the theater. You have to work, you have to sacrifice now, because one day you're going to meet a kid, that there's a kid somewhere in this world that's working out just like you. He's sacrificing just like you. And when you meet him, his line of work will go against yours. And whoever worked the hardest is going to win." And so ever since then, I have always been taught and ingrained the importance of sacrifice and doing the things that are necessary. I always would tell kids, listen, do what you love. But after living my life and experiencing the things that I've experienced, that wasn't necessarily the best advice for me to give them. Because it's not good enough to just do what you love if you want to be the best. You have to do what you're willing to suffer for. That's the difference, is the people who are the best aren't the smartest. They're not the biggest, the strongest, the fastest, but there are those that are willing to grind longer than you. They're willing to suffer longer than you. They can take very uncomfortable situations and be very, very comfortable in that. And they can operate very, very well under chaos. And so that's what my father taught me, and it carried on throughout my career. And I was able to, like you said, accomplish a lot of the things that I was able to accomplish. And like a lot of it had to do with my father.
Wow. That just shows your heart so much, Manti, to give credit to those who helped get where you've gotten. Kind of along that same vein, as you mentioned, I live in the North Shore of Oahu, which, we joke with my friends that it's kind of like Chinatown for Mormons. Yeah. And I'm LDS too, and being from Utah, we know this is a big part of the community here, that faith. But I'm curious, how much do you think the values of your faith, your heritage, your family and community there, and magic, Laie, has shaped who you are as a person?
People have asked how my faith has made a difference in my life. And I've always responded, it has made all the difference in my life. When I was a youth, so I'm the oldest in my family, I'm the oldest of 7 kids. I have a sister right under me, her name is Brianne. We was at a youth conference, and they had this big activity. And the activity was they had a bunch of carnival-like games. And our church leader went up there and he said, hey, what we're gonna do is we're gonna have you guys play these games, and there are prizes. If you win these games, you can get a certain amount of scripts, and some of these prizes are worth a certain amount of scripts. And so my sister and I were like, hey, listen, one of the prizes is a flat screen TV. I was like, let's do all we can to get this TV and take it home for the family. And so she and I, we go out there, and we're going from game to game to game, trying to get as many scripts as possible. And probably about 45 minutes later, the same leader went up. He said, okay, now everybody, it's over. Line up over here by the Relief Society room and come claim your prizes. And so my sister and I are standing there in line, and I'm about to go in to the Relief Society room to go collect our TV, right? And I'm looking at my scripts, and I'm looking at my sisters, and individually, we didn't have enough. But combined, we had a good chance of getting this TV. And so me trying to be the hero, I was like, Brand, give me all your scripts. So my sister being the loving person she is, she's like, okay, perfect. She handed me all her scripts. I took it all, and I walked into the room. Now, when I walked into the room, the stake presidency was sitting at this table, and I sat across from them, and they looked at me, they said, okay, young man, let's see your scripts. And so I grabbed this big bag out, and I put the script on the table, and I remember the stake president looked at me, he said, well done, thou good and faithful servant. You have just inherited the celestial kingdom. And I'm thinking to myself, where's the TV? That's what is this? And I remember the young woman president comes in, she picks me up off of the chair and escorts me into the chapel. And for those of us who are members, the chapel is set up perfectly for this type of activity, because all the rows are split in 3 sections, and she takes me to the far side of the chapel, and she sits me down. She's like, congratulations, you reached the celestial kingdom. When she said that, I immediately thought of my sister. And I knew she didn't have scripts. And so I remember sitting in the celestial kingdom, and I'm staring at this door, and it was closed, like the doors you see. We'll pretend that that's the door. It was closed just like that. And I knew she was next. And I remember as she walked through the door, I was trying to wave her over. and the leader told her to sit on the far side. And that was the first time that life took on a whole new meaning for me. That no matter what I accomplish, no matter what possessions I have, the most important thing to me is the eternal promise that my family will be forever. Now, fast forward to my rookie year in the NFL. Obviously, everybody knows that I was going through some things during that time. But my parents were really pushing me to get to the temple. Like, get to the temple, get to the temple. You need to get to the temple. That same sister was currently, at that time, serving a mission in New Mexico. And she sent me an email. And I remember exactly where I was when I opened that email. I was on the bus. We just finished the Fan Fest at the stadium, at Qualcomm Stadium. And I'm on the bus getting ready to go back to the hotel. And I opened up her email. And in that email, she said, hey, bro, I know you're getting a lot of pressure. I know you're getting a lot of pressure to go to the temple. And everybody's saying you need to do it for you. But I want you to know I need you to do it for me. I need you to do it for me because heaven would cease to be heaven if you were not there. And so you talk about how my faith has shaped me. It's given me what we call an eternal perspective. That, yes, am I trying to be the best at whatever I set my mind at doing? Yes. Am I trying to get a big house? Yes. Am I trying to get nice cars? Yes. Am I trying to spoil my wife and my kids? Yes. But at the end of the day, all of that does not mean anything if that mansion in heaven isn't filled with the people I love the most. And so that's how my faith has changed me.
That's awesome. You know, I love that we're here at this conference. I was just thinking what a privilege it is that we're in a place where we can live out our faith in this country, this day and age. And I'm so grateful for the people who fight for those rights today. And, you know, we're in mixed company here. For some people, you know, they might not share any of the context of our faith, but what's neat, and everybody's been on stage who's shared these great capital T truths, that relationships and love are our highest ideal.
Right.
And I think it's just so apparent that that's just what you embody, Manti. It's amazing. And speaking of relationships, you know, you've had an unbelievable plot twist in your career when you basically got thrown head first into a scandal at no fault of your own. For those of you who haven't seen Manti's Netflix documentary, I highly recommend it. It's riveting. And I can't tell you the amount of compassion and empathy that I gained from Manti, like meeting you today, like, you know, I mean, yeah, swoon level career, you know, like football star, but actually who you are as a person is what made me so excited to meet you today, Manti. And you really show your heart there, and you ended up being a part of this scandal around social media debacle where you were completely taken advantage of in terms of your trust and your earnestness, and then scrutinized in the public as and your reputation slandered, and you know, people holding you in the worst light and not giving you any benefit of the doubt. What did you know? The one thing that stood out to me more than anything in your amazing documentary was your incredible otherworldly ability to forgive. And speaking of these truths, these capital T truths that we can all share no matter our faith or where we come from, what did you learn in this journey about forgiveness? Can you share that with us?
So I've often asked this question that matter of fact, it's more of a statement that I don't know anybody who holds on to anger, revenge, this rage that is happy with their life. And after 2013, my life was in such turmoil because of this anger and this rage that I held, that I was giving the most important thing that I could give somebody, and that was my peace. Whenever you're holding this rage and you're holding this anger towards somebody or this need for revenge towards somebody, you're allowing this person to take that from you. And so in order for me to reclaim any type of peace, any type of balance in my life, I had to first reclaim that peace. And so the first thing I had to do was I had to let it go. And so I had to forgive. Now, after I did that, I started to regain my balance. I started to see things a little clearer than I did. And then, like we just talked about faith, as somebody who professes to be a follower of Christ, there's always those acronyms, WWJD, and we all kind of know what that means. What would Jesus do? Well, for somebody who has been brought up in the church, which really we study this man, we follow this man. Who am I and who would I be if I say that I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and I follow Jesus Christ? Who would I be that I wouldn't do what he would tell me to do? And if we're getting specific, what would Jesus do? We know exactly what Jesus would do. When he was on the cross, what was one of the last things he said? Forgive them, for they know not what they do. So if the greatest man to ever walk this planet could be in the most painful of circumstances after enduring all the things he had to endure, and he could forgive, then why can I not forgive? When I meet my Maker in the next life, I want to make sure that when I sit down with him, that he can look at me and say, well, if I didn't let it go, that he'll look at me and say, hey, Manti, all those days that you got on your knees and you asked me for forgiveness, but you couldn't forgive this person. I wanted to make sure that when I met him, that I did my very, very best to mimic the man that I believe we're all trying to mimic, and that's the Savior. And so we all have the template, we all have the path that we're all should be following, but it takes a lot of courage to do that. You know, it takes a lot of discipline. It takes spiritual strength to do that. But I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, that when I did that and when I put my trust in the atonement, in forgiveness, that I benefit from that. I benefited from that. My life got its color back. You know, I was no longer in that storm anymore. And so, yeah, forgiveness was the tool that helped me to regain that peace.
Wow. Oh man, that's so profound. You know, in your interview, in the documentary, I thought one of the most profound things you shared was that in the aftermath, because for those of you who don't know the story, you know, there was this deep betrayal. Someone did what's called catfishing on social media. A man portrayed himself as a woman and created a false identity and really misled you. And, you know, ultimately you talked about how you lost your, like, confidence in yourself, like your ability to kind of trust your own judgment. I think that's probably the most devastating thing that possibly could come out of this is you're you know, losing that continuity to trust oneself. And I can totally relate from my own battle wounds of living as a humanoid, you know? It's like when you get betrayed deeply, you're like, how did I miss this? And then, of course, the media was saying the very thing accusing you, how they accused you of being in on it, that perhaps you were party to this tragedy. And ultimately, you know, how did you regain and overcome that fear and find a way to, again, you know, really heal the relationship with yourself and learn to love yourself again?
Well, what was the first step was I didn't realize how heavily I weighed people's opinions of me, because prior to 2013, they were all positive. You know, I just so happened to be a really good football player, but I also was one to always be the first to help somebody. Again, I'll share a story with you. Again, it's with my father. We were driving downtown Honolulu, and Hawaii has a challenge with homelessness. And I remember I was probably like 7 years old, and I saw a person on the side of the road with a sign. And I asked my dad, and I said, Dad, why are there people like that? And again, my dad taking very, very simple situations and making them life-altering conversations. He said, well, son, I believe that there are people like that to see if people like us would do something about it. And so for me, it was just, okay, like, I was that guy. Like, not only was I the best person on a football team, but I was also the person that would go sit next to somebody in the cafeteria that didn't have any friends. I was the first to volunteer to go do some charity work. I was doing charity work at the Boys and Girls Club. So I was doing all of these things. I was an Eagle Scout. And so all of the narrative before 2013 was all positive. but I didn't understand how heavily I weighed those until all of those became negative. So what once was love became hate. What once was admiration became criticism. What once was you were the most decorated college football player of all time, now you're the fool. And now my whole world is a mess. And so the first thing I had to do was to realize and to learn, like, who am I? Who am I at my core? Who am I without the praise? Who am I without the criticism? Because if you lean either way, it's both dangerous. Like, it's like a kickstand. Once you kick that thing, down goes the bike. So I had to learn to stand firm on my own two, to stay 10 toes down. And so once I was able to do that, that was when I really became unbothered. That's when I really became dangerous. Because there's nothing you can tell me now, both good or bad, that's going to change my values. That's going to change how I see myself in the mirror. Because I remember those days where I used to do this thing right after 2013 where I'll stare at myself in the mirror and I'll tell myself, Manti, you're that dude. And I remember I felt like such a fraud doing that when I first did it, because my confidence was shot, everything was gone, that I couldn't even believe that I was telling myself that. So I would write quotes on pieces of paper, and I would put it up on my mirror. I would have like birthday cards that my family would make, and I'd put it up on my side mirror. And so every morning and every night when I would brush my teeth, I would read them, just to help me become comfortable with me being me. And so once I was able to do that, then all the exterior noise really had no effect on me. And so that's how I was able to navigate. Now, it was a process, you know. It wasn't something that happens overnight. You know, it's a process. So anybody that's going through any type of self-reflection, whatever you want to call it, self-improvement, have some grace with yourself. Like, allow yourself the time. You know, I always tell people, I was like, it took God six days to create the world, so don't think you're going to change your world in one day. It's going to take some time. For me, it took 4 years. And so now I sit here, and good luck getting to me now.
I love it. I love it. There's no question that, you know, your self-love, like, it's really apparent, and it's hard-earned, right? Like, you went through a lot, and one of my literary heroes is a gentleman named C. Terry Warner. He wrote this beautiful book called Bonds That Make Us Free, and he talks about, it changed my view about forgiveness so drastically. It shifted my paradigm. He talks about how forgiveness is actually forgoing for excusing your own wrong behavior because of someone else's. Now, like, I had always thought forgiveness was like pardoning someone's evil or their sin or something, and he talks about how only God can pardon. But ultimately, he implies that there's a form of repentance attached to forgiveness. And I know that sometimes we're like genuine victims, where it's just something, you know, like absolutely you're driving along and someone just smacks you, you know. But even it may be, you know, repenting for not loving like Christ does, or not loving the way you could, or in your case, you shared, didn't love yourself at that time. And you talked about how forgiveness of self was the conduit to ultimately forgive, you know, this person that had harmed you and your family. And keep in mind, this beautiful audience, that like, it wasn't just that he was slandered in the media and became this public persona that was villainized. It was financial devastation, career devastation, mental health, like tremendous anxiety issues, like real cost. Really, talk about a high contact sport that was being a famous superstar that went from meteoric success to absolute ruin. And you know, would you give advice to people, young people or anyone here who might aspire to potentially be like a high profile person, someone who might be in the public eye, someone who might wish for that kind of profile?
I would say, be careful as to the reason why you want to be there.
That's great.
I think if you're just doing things to be famous, that's the wrong reason to do anything. Because famous people oftentimes don't give you value. They're just famous. They just have a lot of followers, they have a lot of likes. But are you the type of person that when you walk into a room, you immediately elevate everybody? Are you the person that by shaking somebody's hand, that person was battling a battle that you had no idea about, but because they just met you, you gave them some hope, you gave them some peace? And so fame, I wouldn't chase that. I would chase at what kind of value can I give this world? My father, he always would tell me, what profiteth a man that he gain the world but lose his soul?
Yeah.
And so when I just want to make people feel empowered. I want them to, whenever I meet you and I leave, I want to make your world better. I want to make sure that when you go to somebody and say, man, I met Manti Te'o, and whether I heard stuff about him in the past or not, like, this dude he's the man. And that for me, whether that's famous, whether that's role model, whatever that is, whatever niche you can label that's what I want it to be. And for anybody that's trying to be in the public eye, understand that it is a double-edged sword. It is a tool like any other tool that if you use it properly, you can do great things, but be very, very careful. If you don't know how to use a buzzsaw, don't use the buzzsaw. If you don't know how to use fame, notoriety, stay clear from it. It's dangerous. But I wouldn't be here sitting in front of you if I wasn't singing that light. But we are here doing great things, and that's what I'm saying. I'm here because I want to add value. I'm here because I firmly believe that each and every one of us are meant to live our lives so that we could be the best version of ourselves, so that somebody else who's on that same path can say, man, I can do it because Manti is doing it. I know I can do it because Manti has shown me how to do it. I know I can overcome these challenges because Manti has done it. And so if we can do that, that's what I would encourage everybody to do. Like, don't chase the fame. Chase the value that you can give somebody's life. And I think we all can agree that this world is in a lot of turmoil right now, and if we can make it better one person at a time, why not do it?
Yeah. So good. You're a delight. Manti, I got to meet your drop-dead gorgeous smoke show wife, Jovi, backstage. Yeah. By the way, she is real AF. Like,
she's here.
She is. She's the real deal. Yeah. And, it's amazing how, like, after watching what you went through, where there were memes of you with an invisible girlfriend and all of this calamity around what happened, how do you feel now looking back that you have this prize of a beautiful wife in your life?
Yeah.
And do you see that, like, everything happened for you instead of to you? Like, what did you learn from all of that?
Well, they always say, life is 10% what happens to you, 90% what you do with it. And I'm grateful to have my wife because she's been such a pillar in our family. And I remember I was so reluctant when we first started dating. I was like, man, I ain't trying to post you. And she was like, are you cheating on me? Like, are you trying to hide me? I was like, no, like, you have no idea what's about to come once I do. But eventually I did, and the media actually turned their attention on her and went and researched her life. So again, if you guys want fame, good luck. I wouldn't recommend it, right? Yeah. But her being the pillar of strength that she is individually as an individual helped me to overcome a lot of my insecurities, helped me to overcome a lot of the things that I feared a lot. And obviously she's beautiful, so I definitely upgraded.
Nice hustle. Nice hustle.
But I'm grateful. I'm grateful because we have two beautiful children, man. And if there's anything that I regret is that I didn't start my family sooner, because my children, my daughter Hiromi, she's 18 months. My son Cairo, he's 3 months. And it is the best feeling in the world to see them when I come home and my daughter come running around or my son smiling at me, and it really gives life true meaning for me. And obviously I couldn't have kids, so I'm grateful that my wife could give me two beautiful children.
Yeah.
Life is great.
That's amazing. # spiritual billionaire.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So as you've kind of navigated this whole journey and you ended up being approached for to make the documentary.
Yeah.
When did you first learn about it, and what was your involvement? I mean, what a vulnerable thing
Yeah.
to do, to like completely go into that
Yeah.
again after all those years.
Well, it was beautiful because it was perfect timing. Reason I say that is Tony Vainuku reached out to me, and we had a conversation. And he kind of explained what he was trying to do. And I told him, I was like, listen, Tony, like, I'm okay now. Like, I already healed from everything. Like, I don't feel the need to explain myself anymore. Like, I'm really at peace with where my life is. And he's like, that is exactly why you need to say it. That's exactly why you need to share it. Because there's somebody that's going through something that you don't know, that you could inspire and that you could affect in a positive way. And so I told him, I was like, okay, listen, like, let me talk to my family and I'll let you know. So I talked to my family, and I remember my mother said, son, this is your mission. This is your purpose. Because for a long time, from 2013 till August 16, 2022, I think that's when the documentary aired.
Yeah.
For almost 10 years, I literally would ask Heavenly Father, like, what is my purpose here? Like, how am I supposed to inspire anybody when the only thing that people seem to remember about me is that's the fool who got catfish? Like, they don't remember that, oh, that's the kid that was always at St. Baldrick's with the children who was going through cancer. That's the guy who almost won the Heisman. They don't remember all the positives. They just remember the negatives. So I told my mom, all right, let's do it. So we did it. And basically all I wanted to do, and I told Tony Vainuku this and Ryan Duffy, the two directors, I said, listen, I don't want this to be my story. I want this to be the entire story. So if you want me to be a part of this, everybody who's involved or who was involved needs to be a part of this. Because any human, if you hear one side of the story, you're going to immediately think, what? What did the other person say? Well, guess what? Everybody's on there.
Yeah.
And so I wanted that piece and that documentary to be everything. So by the time that 2 1-hour segments were done, there were no questions. There was very clear what my part was and what my part wasn't. And all the facts were laid out there. And so I just was there to tell my piece and to ensure that all of the facts were out there. And, you know, I was just hoping that it would inspire somebody out there. And, you know, it became what it is.
Dude, you really inspired me.
Thank you.
And my boys, which my middle son goes to Kahuku High School.
Yeah, nice.
And, you know, it's interesting because you really are like stuff of legends on the North Shore, you know, and obviously much broader than that. I think it's so sweet that you're like, what is my purpose? Like, how do people remember me? There's no way you being you with your reckless generosity of spirit would ever get missed, Manti. No. Like, we're so blessed to have you here. I would just love to end with asking this last question, which is, what would you like to leave our audience with? Like, they've heard your story, seen the documentary, watched you play on the field, throw it all out there like you do. What would you like to be remembered for? What would you like to leave with everybody?
I'd like to leave, I mean, if you watch the documentary, you can take so many different things from there, but there's something that I'd like to leave with this audience that you won't learn from the documentary, that you won't learn from any newspaper articles, any reports about me, and it's this: trust in the timing that God has for your life. Trust in Him. He has a purpose for you. He has something that He needs you to do. So like I said, after January 2013, all the way to August 16, 2022, I literally was like, I'm doing everything I can. You know, I don't know what else to do. I'm not inspiring anybody. There's really no purpose here, Heavenly Father. Like, I remember going to the temple, like, I'm here. Like, what is my purpose here? And after the documentary aired, there have been countless people from all around the world, from Africa, from France, from Brazil, from the United States, from Canada, that have reached out and said, hey, listen, man, I was suicidal yesterday. I watched your documentary, and by watching your documentary, it gave me hope that I could still do it. And so what kind of responsibility is that for me now, that my life has, because of the things that I've been through, that it's become an inspiration for somebody else. So for those of us who are going through our storms, because life storms do come, and they're going to come often. for those of us that are going through the refiner's fire, as uncomfortable as it is, I challenge each and every one of you to take a second amidst that storm and just think for one time that maybe, just maybe, the reason why I'm going through this isn't just for me. That God has heard some prayers from his children elsewhere, prayers of hope, prayers of, God, give me a sign, and he chose you to go through the storms that you're going through, to overcome the trials that you're going through, so that when they put your life out there, that you can be the answer to somebody else's prayer. And so, trust in the timing of your life that God has for your life, because he knows the beginning from the end. He knows what you are, and he knows what you are at your best. So let him mold you. And the only way that he can mold you is send a storm. Storm is God's way of adding more weight. I work out all the time. I don't know if you can tell. I try to fight off the dad bod. The dad bod and crumble was a bad combination for me for a long time. But for those of us that work out, we understand it. If I want to get stronger, I got to add more weight. Well, in God's terms and in life's terms, he has to add more trial. So when trials come, instead of looking at it like, oh, crap, this sucks, look at it like, okay, let's add more. And let's keep adding it that I can get stronger. So that's what I would say to everybody.
Amazing. Manti, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being you. Well, I just want to end with saying that, this has been such a spiritual conference. Like, people are just living out loud with their beliefs, their faith. But, I just want to say to people in the audience, because we have such backgrounds. Some people here, we live in a spiritual melting pot. Mm-hmm. We're in an interesting time where stuff can be really triggering. There's a lot of wounding. There's a lot of feelings. So thanks for those of you who hold space for us to come up here and be who we are and share.
Right.
Like, there's people in this audience today, this asks a lot of them to let us be ourselves. And we love you guys for it. So round of applause to all of you guys, too. So Manti, any last words of advice or wisdom or?
Be the best version of you.
Yeah.
Be patient and endure. That's what's gonna separate you from anybody else. It's not necessarily your abilities, because yes, brains can get you a certain amount of length all along the path of life, but really it's who is willing to endure the most. And I'll leave you with a quote that I always tell kids. I said, listen, I won't know how successful you will be or how successful you want to be by your answer to this question. How fast and how long are you willing to run if the distance was unknown? If your answer is anything less than as fast as it takes and as long as it takes, you won't make it. Because that's what this life is. It's about enduring a race and running a race that you don't know when I'm going to get to the finish line. I don't know when I'm going to achieve my goal. I don't know when I'm going to know my purpose, but eventually it's going to come. But if I'm willing to run as fast as I can and endure as much as I can, I know it's just a matter of time now. And so if time is the only thing we have to wait for, have patience. So that's what I'll leave you with.
Amazing. Manti Te'o, everybody. Thank you so much. Thanks, brother.
Great job.